The grand chamber of the courthouse was packed with journalists, high-ranking officials, and officers. The air buzzed with excitement as cameras flashed and reporters whispered among themselves. Officer Harlan Tate stood tall, his uniform crisp, his badge gleaming under the bright overhead lights. But the true center of attention sat beside him. Bravo, a battle-hardened Belgian Malinois with piercing amber eyes. He had spent years on the force, taking down criminals, tracking missing persons, and even shielding Harlan from gunfire. Today, Bravo was being honored with the Medal of Valor, a rare tribute for a K-9 officer, recognizing his unmatched courage and loyalty. This was supposed to be a moment of triumph, a day of celebration. But something felt wrong. The mayor stood at the podium, clearing his throat before addressing the crowd. In times of great peril, true heroes emerge. Some wear uniforms like Officer Tate and some walk on four legs. Bravo has been more than just a K-9. He has been a guardian, a savior, and a warrior. Today, we honor him for his bravery, for the lives he has saved, and for his unwavering service to this city. The audience erupted into applause. Harlan placed a firm but proud hand on Bravo's back, feeling the rhythmic rise and fall of the dog's breath. But then, a subtle shift. Bravo's breathing changed. His muscles tensed. His ears flicked, scanning the room. His deep brown eyes locked onto something, or someone. At first, Harlan thought it was just the overwhelming crowd getting to him. Bravo had been trained to remain calm under pressure, but even the best K-9s had their limits. Then, a low growl rumbled from deep within the dog's chest. It wasn't a warning growl. It was something far more primal, an imminent attack signal. Harlan barely had time to react before Bravo lunged forward, his powerful body moving with lightning speed. Gasps echoed through the chamber, followed by the frantic snapping of camera shutters. The crowd recoiled as Bravo surged toward the front of the room, his teeth bared, his growl deep and menacing. The mayor stumbled back, gripping the podium in shock. Security officers reached for their weapons, unsure of what was happening. But Bravo wasn't attacking at random. He had a target, and that target was someone in the audience. A man in a tailored navy suit had been clapping just moments ago. Now his face had turned ghostly pale, his hands trembling. He took an instinctive step back, but it was too late. Bravo lunged at him, snarling viciously, his powerful jaws snapping just inches from the man's chest. The man let out a strangled gasp as he nearly tripped over himself, colliding with a nearby chair. "Bravo, stand down!" Harlan shouted, his voice sharp with authority. But Bravo didn't listen. He was trained to obey instantly, except when he detected a serious threat. And right now, Bravo was convinced that this man was dangerous. Harlan's pulse pounded in his ears as he yanked back on Bravo's leash with all his strength. The dog resisted, his claws scraping against the polished marble floor, his body still locked onto the trembling man. The crowd was frozen in shock. Journalists kept their cameras rolling. Something was very, very wrong. Then, the man did something that made Harlan's blood run cold. Instead of shouting in protest or demanding an explanation, he reached for his pocket, quick, desperate. A rookie mistake, because in that instant, Bravo reacted with deadly precision. Before anyone could process what was happening, the heroic K-9 officer launched forward again, teeth flashing this time for the kill. This story is just getting started, and you won't want to miss a second. Drop a like and subscribe. We're so close to 100K subscribers. Turn on notifications and join us for this thrilling tale full of mystery and action. The room was chaos. Officers shouted, the mayor's security scrambled, and the crowd surged back as Bravo lunged a second time. Harlan barely managed to restrain him, the thick leather leash cutting into his palm. But Bravo was strong, far stronger than most K-9s his size. His body was coiled like a spring, his deep growl vibrating through the air. The man in the navy suit, the one Bravo had singled out, stood paralyzed, his back pressed against the judge's bench. His trembling hand hovered just over his pocket. His face was sheet white, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple. He knew that if he moved an inch, Bravo would strike. "Sir, hands where I can see them," barked one of the officers, leveling a hand toward the man. But the suspect didn't comply. Instead, his fingers twitched, inching closer to whatever he was hiding. A knife? A gun? A detonator? Harlan's instincts screamed for him to act, but he couldn't risk letting go of Bravo. He gritted his teeth, feeling the tension in the leash as the dog pulled forward with raw force. "Stand down!" Harlan yelled again, but Bravo's eyes burned with intensity. He wasn't backing off. He knew something nobody else did. Then a flicker of movement. It happened so fast that no one could react in time. The suspect's hand darted into his pocket, his breath coming in short gasps. The second his fingers closed around something, Bravo sprang like a missile. His jaws clamped onto the man's forearm with bone-crushing precision. A scream of agony tore through the chamber as Bravo's grip locked down, his powerful muscles flexing. The man's knees buckled, his other hand jerking free from his pocket. And that's when everyone saw it. A black handgun, fully loaded. Safety off. The courtroom erupted. Officers surged forward, tackling the suspect to the ground. The gun skidded across the polished floor, coming to a stop inches from the mayor's feet. Harlan's stomach dropped. If Bravo hadn't attacked when he did, if he had hesitated even for a second, someone could have been dead. Maybe the mayor, maybe a police officer, maybe Harlan himself. Bravo had saved them, again. But something wasn't right. As officers wrestled the suspect into handcuffs, Harlan caught a glimpse of his face. Not just panic, not just pain, fear, real soul-deep terror. And it wasn't because he had been caught. He was afraid of something else. Someone else. "You don't get it," the man gasped as officers yanked him up. His eyes flickered wildly, scanning the crowd. "I'm not the one you should be worried about. He's here." Harlan's pulse stopped. Who was here? And why was this man so terrified? Then Bravo let out a sharp, guttural bark. His ears snapped forward, his stance rigid. He was no longer looking at the suspect. He was looking past him, at someone else in the room. The room was still reeling from the chaos. Officers pinned the suspect to the ground, the metallic clink of handcuffs echoing through the chamber. The mayor was shaken but unharmed, gripping the podium for support. Journalists whispered frantically, their cameras still rolling. But Bravo wasn't done. His growl deepened, his muscles still coiled like a predator on the hunt. His focus had shifted, his sharp amber eyes now locked onto someone else. And Harlan felt it, that gut-wrenching instinct telling him this wasn't over. The suspect, his face contorted in pain, kept shaking his head. "You don't understand," he muttered, his breath ragged. His eyes darted around the room, desperate. "I wasn't here for him. I was here to stop him." A cold weight settled in Harlan's chest. Stop who? His mind raced, scanning the sea of faces in the audience. Judges, city officials, officers, any one of them could be the threat. But Bravo already knew. His body stiffened, his ears perked, his hackles rose like bristling wires. And then he lunged. Harlan's grip tightened, his arm yanking back just in time. Bravo strained against the leash, his growl turning vicious. Gasps erupted in the chamber as people stumbled back. But his target wasn't obvious. Not at first. Then Harlan saw him. A man near the back of the room, standing unnaturally still. Dark suit, average height, clean-shaven face. Unremarkable, too unremarkable. But Bravo's instincts never lied. The stranger wasn't reacting like the others. He wasn't panicked. He wasn't confused. He was calm. Too calm. "Sir, hands where we can see them," an officer shouted, stepping forward. But the man didn't move. His expression didn't shift. He just blinked once slowly. Then, with eerie composure, he reached into his jacket. Harlan's heartbeat slammed against his ribs. Time stretched. Every muscle in his body tensed. Adrenaline flooding his system. Gun? Knife? Bomb? It didn't matter. He didn't wait to find out. "Bravo, take him." The leash snapped free. The impact was instant. Bravo launched forward with terrifying speed. his jaws locking onto the man's wrist just as something metallic glinted under his sleeve. A gun? A detonator? Harlan didn't have time to see. The man let out a grunt. Not of pain, but of annoyance. He twisted, his other hand darting toward his belt. But before he could reach it, 3 officers tackled him hard, slamming him to the ground. A deafening crash echoed through the chamber as bodies hit the floor. Papers scattered. Chairs toppled. And then silence. Seconds passed like hours. Harlan's pulse pounded as he rushed forward. Bravo stood over the man's body, growling low and dangerous. The officers held him down, pinning his arms. And that's when Harlan saw it. A small black device lying just inches from his open palm. Not a gun. Not a knife. Something worse. Something that could have killed everyone. A hush fell over the courtroom as the realization sank in. This man wasn't just dangerous. He was an assassin. And Bravo had just saved them all. Again, the chamber was frozen in stunned silence. Officers restrained the second suspect, his face pressed against the cold marble floor. The small black device lay inches from his outstretched fingers, its presence sending a chill through the air. Harlan barely breathed as he crouched down, his pulse hammering in his ears. This wasn't just another criminal. This was something bigger. His gut told him that Bravo had just uncovered a threat that no one had even realized was lurking in the room. And whatever that device was, it had been meant for someone important. Bravo stood rigid, his growl still vibrating in his chest. His amber eyes never left the man on the ground, watching for even the slightest movement. The suspect, if that's what he even was, wasn't struggling. He wasn't cursing or demanding a lawyer like most criminals would. Instead, he slowly lifted his head, his expression unsettlingly calm. Too calm. "You have no idea what you've just interfered with," he murmured, his voice eerily steady. His lip curled in something between a smirk and a sneer. "This was never about me." Harlan's blood turned ice cold. He exchanged a quick look with the officers around him, then glanced toward the first suspect, the man Bravo had attacked first, the one who had drawn a gun. He was still in cuffs, shaking his head as if this was all some kind of nightmare. Harlan's stomach clenched. "Then who was it about?" he demanded, his voice sharp. But before the suspect could answer, Bravo's ears flicked sharply, his head snapping toward the courtroom doors. Harlan felt it too, a shift in the air. Something was wrong. The realization hit him like a punch to the chest. The second suspect hadn't been acting alone. He hadn't failed. He had stalled. Just enough time for someone else to make their move. "Everyone, get down!" Harlan bellowed, reaching for Bravo's leash. But before he could even process what was happening, the courtroom doors slammed open. A shadow moved, fast, deliberate, a blur of motion, and then a single gunshot. The sound ripped through the chamber, shattering the stunned silence. People screamed, diving for cover. Judges, city officials, reporters, all scrambled in panic. Harlan barely had time to react before Bravo surged forward, his instincts faster than any human's. The K-9 launched himself toward the shooter, a deep, guttural snarl erupting from his throat. The bullet had missed, but just barely. And now Bravo was hunting. Harlan sprinted after him, his breath tight in his chest. The suspect bolted, weaving through the chaos, his gun still raised. But Bravo was faster. He cut through the crowd like a bullet, his body a blur of trained precision. This wasn't just another arrest. This was a hunt, and Bravo never let his prey escape. The gunshot still echoed through the chamber, mixing with the terrified screams of the crowd. Officers shouted orders, their voices barely cutting through the chaos. Bravo was already in motion, his powerful legs propelling him forward like a missile locked onto its target. Harlan barely had time to react before his partner lunged into the sea of panicked bodies, his deep snarl striking pure fear into anyone in his path. The shooter had made a fatal mistake, turning his back on a K-9 trained to hunt. Harlan sprinted after Bravo, weaving through overturned chairs and scrambling officials. The shooter was fast, but Bravo was faster. The dog closed the distance with terrifying precision, his muscles tensed for impact. The suspect reached the double doors at the back of the chamber, shoving them open with desperate force. But it didn't matter. Bravo was already airborne. He launched himself like a bullet, his jaws locking onto the shooter's forearm just as the man tried to fire again. The shot went wide, slamming into a marble column instead of flesh. A strangled scream tore from the suspect's throat as Bravo's teeth sank deep, his entire body twisting as he yanked the shooter to the ground. The man crashed down hard, the gun clattering away across the polished floor. Officers closed in, weapons drawn, but Bravo wasn't letting go. Not until Harlan called him off. "Bravo! Stand down!" Harlan shouted, his voice sharp and commanding. For a split second, the K9 held his grip, his powerful jaws still clenched around the man's wrist. Then, with one final warning growl, he released. Blood stained the suspect's sleeve, his chest heaving in ragged breaths. The man barely had time to react before officers swarmed him, forcing his hands behind his back. "Move, move!" one of them barked, yanking him upright, but just like before, he wasn't afraid. His lips curled into a twisted grin, his eyes darting toward the first suspect, the man Bravo had attacked at the start of the ceremony. Harlan followed his gaze, his stomach turning cold. This wasn't over. They weren't two separate threats. They were working together. And now, one of them had been caught, but the other... Bravo tensed again, his ears flicking toward the courtroom balcony. Harlan barely had time to process before the radio on his belt crackled to life. "Suspect sighted, second shooter on the upper level." The voice was urgent, almost breathless. And just like that, Harlan realized the truth. The real assassin wasn't on the ground floor. He had been waiting above them this entire time. And now, he had the perfect vantage point. The words from the radio sent a cold shock through Harlan's veins. The real shooter wasn't on the ground. He was above them, watching everything unfold from the courtroom balcony. Bravo's ears flicked sharply, his sharp amber eyes locking onto the upper level. Harlan didn't hesitate. "Upstairs. Now!" he barked, gripping Bravo's leash as he pushed through the panicked crowd. Officers rushed toward the stairwell, their weapons raised, their boots slamming against the marble floor. But Harlan already knew they were running out of time. Bravo pulled hard, his instincts kicking in, his body moving like a coiled spring ready to strike. He led Harlan toward the winding staircase, his powerful legs barely touching the steps as he surged ahead. They reached the top in seconds. But just as they rounded the corner, a shadow moved. A figure in black darted toward the far exit, his coat whipping behind him. And then, without breaking stride, he turned. Harlan's heart stopped. He had a gun. The flash of the muzzle came first. Then the gunshot. Harlan ducked too late, but before the bullet could hit, Bravo lunged. The K9 threw his body into Harlan, knocking him sideways, the force sending them both crashing into the balcony railing. The bullet missed by mere inches, embedding itself into the wooden banister. But Bravo didn't stop. He recovered instantly. His paws scraped against the polished floor as he locked onto his target, his growl turning into something deadly. The shooter realized it, too. He fired again, but Bravo was already airborne. The impact was brutal. Bravo slammed into the gunman's chest, his jaws clamping onto the man's arm with unrelenting force. The shooter staggered back, his scream of pain swallowed by the chaos below. Harlan scrambled to his feet, drawing his weapon, his breath ragged. "Bravo, hold!" he commanded, steadying his aim. The gunman twisted, trying to shake the K9 off. But Bravo wouldn't let go. He had locked in his grip, his powerful muscles refusing to release. Then a horrifying sound. The wooden railing behind them groaned. A sickening creak. Harlan's eyes widened. The fight had pushed them too far back, too close to the edge. And before he could react, the weakened banister gave way. The shooter's balance shifted, his body tilting backward, and Bravo was still attached to him. Harlan's world slowed. "Bravo!" he shouted, his voice breaking, but it was too late. In a heart-stopping instant, the shooter plummeted backward, and Bravo went with him. Time collapsed. The shooter's body twisted in the air, his scream barely leaving his throat before gravity took him. And Bravo was still attached. Harlan's chest seized as he lunged forward, his hands reaching, but he was too far. The wooden railing splintered into jagged shards, the final crack echoing through the massive chamber. Gasps filled the air as people below watched in horror. The assassin and the K9 tumbled in a chaotic blur, limbs flailing, the hard marble floor rushing up to meet them. This couldn't be happening. Harlan's instincts screamed for him to move. His boots pounded against the balcony floor as he surged toward the edge, ignoring the officers shouting behind him. His vision tunneled, locking onto the falling figures. The distance was deadly. If Bravo hit the ground at that speed, no. Harlan's throat tightened, his mind already calculating the impact, the damage, the chance of survival. Too high, too fast, too late. But then something changed. The shooter's body jerked midair, his coat snagging onto a banner that draped from the balcony above. The heavy fabric tore with a sickening rip, but it was just enough to slow the fall. Just enough for Bravo to react. The K9 released his grip at the last possible second, twisting his body midair like a trained athlete. His claws scraped against the thick velvet banner, his paws fighting for traction. For a split second, he hung there, muscles straining. But the weight was too much. The fabric gave way. Bravo dropped the final few feet, landing with a brutal thud onto a table below. With splintered on impact, glass shattered. The shooter, however, wasn't as lucky. He crashed onto the floor just a second later, his body crumpling at an unnatural angle. Officers swarmed him instantly, weapons drawn, barking commands. But Harlan wasn't looking at him. His eyes were locked onto Bravo, his partner, his friend, lying motionless in the wreckage. Harlan barely remembered moving. 1 second, he was on the balcony. The next, his knees hit the shattered wood beside Bravo's limp body. His breath came in short gasps. "Bravo," he rasped, his voice raw. No response. His hands hovered over the K9's chest, not wanting to hurt him if he was still breathing. The world around him blurred. People shouted, sirens wailed outside, but all Harlan could hear was the desperate pounding of his own heartbeat. Then a twitch, a slow, painful rise and fall of Bravo's chest, a weak but steady breath. And in that moment, the tight grip around Harlan's heart finally loosened. But before relief could settle, someone shouted from across the room, "There's another one." Harlan's breath barely had time to steady before those 3 words cut through the air like a knife. "There's another one." His head snapped up, his pulse hammering against his ribs. Officers were already moving, their weapons raised, their voices sharp with urgency. The realization crashed down on him. This wasn't over. The shooter had just been a pawn. There was someone else. Someone still out there. And Bravo, his injured body struggling to move, knew it too. The K9 let out a low, guttural growl, his ears flicking toward the far side of the room. Harlan followed his gaze, adrenaline surging back through his veins. People were still scrambling, the chaos far from over, but one figure stood apart from the rest. Still, watching, waiting, a man in a dark overcoat, standing near the emergency exit. His expression unreadable, his posture too controlled, too prepared. Then he turned. Harlan's instincts screamed. "Stop him!" he barked, already shoving himself up from the wreckage. But the suspect was fast. He pushed through the doors in an instant, disappearing into the stairwell beyond. Harlan barely hesitated before taking off after him, his legs burning as he leapt over broken chairs and scattered papers. But before he could reach the exit, a blur of movement streaked past him. Bravo. Injured or not, the K9 was still hunting. He ignored the pain, his paws skidding against the marble as he lunged forward. Harlan's heart clenched. Bravo should have been down, recovering. But that wasn't who he was. He wouldn't stop until the threat was neutralized. And neither would Harlan. The stairwell was dimly lit, the sound of footsteps echoing up the narrow space. Harlan pushed harder, taking the steps 2 at a time, his hand gripping the railing to keep his balance. Below him, Bravo was moving like a shadow, his deep breath steady despite his wounds. The suspect's coat whipped around a corner. Then a door slammed open. They burst onto the rooftop. The city stretched out beneath them, a dizzying view of streets and buildings bathed in neon light. Wind whipped through the air, carrying the distant sounds of sirens. The suspect was already sprinting toward the edge, his movements too sure. He had a plan. He wasn't just running, he was escaping. But Bravo wouldn't let him. The K9 launched forward, his body a blur against the rooftop skyline. The suspect twisted at the last second, reaching into his coat. For what, Harlan didn't know. But Bravo didn't wait to find out. He struck. And in that moment, the chase was over. The wind howled across the rooftop, whipping through Harlan's uniform as he skidded to a stop. The suspect staggered back, a guttural cry of pain escaping his lips as Bravo's powerful jaws clamped onto his arm. The force of the impact sent them both crashing against the rooftop railing, the metal groaning under the weight. The city lights stretched out below them, a deadly drop waiting beneath. But Bravo held firm, his muscles locked, refusing to let go. This was the end of the chase. The man thrashed, his free hand fumbling for something inside his coat. Harlan saw it too late, a blade. A flash of silver glinted under the rooftop lights, the edge gleaming wickedly. The suspect swung down hard, aiming for Bravo's side. Harlan moved before he could think. His body reacted on pure instinct as he lunged, his shoulder slamming into the attacker with every ounce of strength he had left. The blade missed Bravo by inches, clattering against the rooftop. But the impact sent all three of them toppling toward the edge. Harlan's stomach plunged as his boots scraped against the ledge. He caught himself just in time, his hands gripping the cold metal railing. But the suspect wasn't as lucky. He teetered, his arms flailing as his body tilted over the edge. A single scream tore from his throat, then silence. But Harlan wasn't watching the man fall. He was watching Bravo. The K9 had been caught in the momentum of the struggle. His paws slipped, his hind legs dangling dangerously over the side. His claws scratched against the rooftop, his muscles shaking as he struggled to find traction. Harlan's breath hitched in his chest. No, not now. Not after everything. Bravo! Hold on. He lunged forward, his hand grabbing onto Bravo's harness just as the dog's back legs slipped completely off the edge. For a terrifying second, Bravo's weight jerked downward, nearly pulling Harlan with him. His heart pounded in his ears, his grip burning as he fought against gravity itself. Bravo's amber eyes locked onto Harlan's, his body tense, trusting his handler completely. Harlan couldn't let go. He wouldn't. With a final desperate pull, Harlan used every ounce of strength he had left. He gritted his teeth, his muscles screaming in protest, but he didn't stop. Not until Bravo's paws finally found solid ground again. The K9 collapsed against him, his chest rising and falling in deep, exhausted breaths. Harlan let out a shaky exhale, his forehead pressing against Bravo's fur for just a second, just enough to know they had survived. But as he looked over the edge, at the darkness below where the suspect had disappeared, a single thought echoed in his mind. Was it really over? Harlan sat on the courthouse steps, his uniform torn, his muscles aching, his breath still uneven. The flashing red and blue lights of the patrol cars painted the night in streaks of color. Officers moved in every direction, securing the area, speaking to reporters, escorting shaken officials to their vehicles. The chaos was finally over, but all Harlan could focus on was the warm weight pressed against his side. Bravo! The K9 lay beside him, exhausted but alive, his amber eyes half-lidded as Harlan ran a steady hand down his back. The dog had saved countless lives tonight, exposed a hidden assassin, stopped a massacre before it could happen. And yet, as always, he asked for nothing in return. A pair of polished shoes stepped into Harlan's vision. He looked up to see the mayor, his face still pale, his expression shaken, but his eyes full of something else. Respect. Gratitude. Officer Tate, he said, voice steady despite the night's horrors. I don't think words are enough for what you and Bravo did tonight. He reached into his coat, pulling something small and gleaming, the Medal of Valor. The same medal Bravo was supposed to receive before everything went to hell. The mayor knelt down, carefully pinning it to Bravo's collar. The crowd that had gathered, officers, officials, even reporters, applauded. Some with quiet reverence, others with loud, relieved cheers. But Harlan barely heard them. His fingers curled gently around Bravo's fur, his throat tight. "You earned this, buddy," he murmured. Bravo didn't react at first, too tired, too drained. Then, slowly, his tail gave one single wag. Harlan let out a quiet chuckle, shaking his head. "Yeah," he whispered. "Let's go home." As he stood, Bravo pushed himself up as well. His legs a little unsteady, but his spirit unbroken. Together, under the glow of streetlights and the hum of a city that would never know how close it had come to disaster, they walked away from the courthouse. Side by side, a hero and his partner,